I call this story Sydney and the Thought Dial. The Thought Dial is a delightful book that starts with the idea that numbers have some significance. There's a reason why you are thinking about certain numbers. There's a psychology behind a number, why one number, say 3, feels better than 7 or 35. The fellow who helped me see this was Sidney Omarr. He was an astrologer. Millions of people knew him as the astrologer to the stars, the TV stars. And he had a wonderful series of books, including lots of stars that were profiled in books. He would often debate people and take on topics like astrology, myth, or reality. Now, I knew him in a different format. I didn't know him as an astrologer. I knew him as a fellow who took an interest in me, a fellow who was a magician. I was 12 years old when I met Sidney. I knew him as a smooth magician. I also knew his wife, Geraldine. These two people helped me see the benefits of knowing something about the magic, the psychology, the rhythm of numbers. And this is essentially the purpose of this get-together with you, because most people do not know about this book. I think most people will, however, admit that there seems to be some sort of a cycle, an up and a down, or perhaps an expansion and a contraction. The circle of life is a common phrase that people talk about. Most people don't realize that when you're dealing with something like numerology, you're dealing in something that is, in fact, a cycle. Let's say you start with an idea, bing, and sometimes it just doesn't get started. That idea may have to gestate and sit inside your head, and you may have some doubts, and it's not ready for prime time. And then at some point, boom, let's get started. Let's just go and do it. You get this feeling that it's time to move. And then after the initial rush of excitement, oh my goodness, look at all the details. In other words, if you could track what's happening with this idea, it starts off small, hides for a while, and then starts growing, and then it grows slower. There are details you have to, if it's an idea, say you wanted to get this fabulous t-shirt, you have to go out and actually get it made, produced. You have to tell people about it, and before you tell people about it, you got to get all these little details out of the way. And then at some point, it is time to tell people about it. And you have a press release, you go on TV, you think of ways to publicize this wonderful idea. At some point, things begin trucking along. There's harmony. You can actually have time to go home. Everything's going well. And just as that stage comes, often with projects, there will be a time of mystery, deception. Things become unclear. What's the next project, for example? Do you really know who your next partner is, or do you need partners? What happens with a project? And then if it's positive, all those things seem to move aside, and you actually get your payday. You start receiving more and more of these things, and you have to make a decision. Do you continue in that cycle and go through the whole expansion routine after the product has sold well? Or do you say, okay, that's it. I'm shutting down this particular aspect of the business. I'm no longer going to make that t-shirt. Well, what we've just described could be called a cycle. It's the cycle of innovation. Some people might say, well, a lot of things go through this kind of these stages. For example, when I write a book, bing, I get an idea, and then I have some doubts about it. And then I think, well, I'm just going to go and do it. And I start expanding and writing about it, and then the writing gets a little more difficult. And finally, I start telling people about the book, and then it's perhaps a little bit easier. The going is fine. But maybe someone says, yeah, I'll go ahead and book you. But then the booking falls through. And I'm wondering, oh, will I get money to pay for the press of this book? And then finally, perhaps I just complete it. What you see here, again, it's that cycle going through. Sidney had a way of describing this cycle. He would put numbers associated with each parts of these stages when something was going up and then sort of completing itself. That was one of the geniuses of this particular book. He could say, look, our thought process goes through a cycle. When we identify a project that we like, or we can see what are our subconscious thoughts. You could say that this is an extended video interview, an interview that gives you a review. What happens is that there were two special chapters that I liked very much. One had to do with how to talk with yourself. That's where the yes and no. And we also have something that is I guess you would call it, not only direct questions answered, but it was something along the lines of how do you tap your subconscious thoughts. It was this particular chapter that I converted into a card. And so the card on one side has the numbers 1 through 9 plus 11 and 22, which happen to be special numbers in this system developed by Sidney. Locating lost objects is the second very handy set of information. And what I'm suggesting to you is that I'll send you the card ready for you to print out. It's on something called a PDF file. So, locating lost articles. I'd be happy to construct something like this for you to give you an introduction to the thought dial, with the idea that once you've gotten hooked on this card, which tells you this is the way to look for your lost object. I can't tell you how often I've done this. I have a look around my room. I mean, just look at this this mess here, and I think, you know, I'm looking for a particular piece of paper, and I think my subconscious mind knows where it is. And so I would think about the item 3, 2, and 1. 3, 2, and 1. Adds up to 6. 3, 2, 1. That adds up to 6. So when you look up 6, we should be able to find something that's useful. When the total is 6, they might be where sandals and boots are kept. The possibility is strong that it's on a shelf or a stand of some kind that should look at the east or west. Well, isn't that nice? I happen to have been pointing towards the west. And so it might be that way, or have a look. See all this stuff here? This is the state of my room. So I need something like Sidney to help me go through and find this wonderful number system. Now let's move on.